Recourse, a program that tackles legal issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumila Matesa. Remember, you can always be part of this program by tweeting us at Rise Recourse or calling our studio line on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Alternatively, you can email your thoughts about this topic, today's topic, and also give us topics you think we should cover, especially in Africa, as today we are going to concentrate largely on Africa. Today it is no longer whether African countries Today, the issue is no longer whether all African countries, and I mean the entire African continent, will achieve democratic form of government within the next 2 years or so. The uncertainty is whether most African leaders will allow such changes to be achieved peacefully or rather democratically. Those sufficiently wise to recognize the inevitable may have a rare chance of managing the change. But those who even at this 11th hour continue to believe that they can stop this tidal wave of Africa's historical movement may be obliterated by this mighty force and end up in the dustbin of history. These prophetic words by former President of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, at the Leadership Conference in Nigeria may have proven to be true. Today, Rights and Recourse examines the strength of democratic institutions and governance on the African continent. To discuss today's topic, we are joined in the studio by Professor John Tesha, Executive Secretary of the African Forum. We are also welcoming Tumaola Mutlaudi, the SABC journalist who covered most of Africa. Good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon. Thanks.
Prof, let me start with you. For democracy in Africa, it has always been one step forward and two steps backward.
Yeah, in some cases, yes. But let me begin on a positive note. I think, and I'm convinced that Africa has made significant progress in the promotion of democracy, good governance, rule of law, and the rest. I think what we failed is we don't have the capacity to actually go a little further, but we have made significant progress. For example, we started in 1990. We are the first continent to have a charter on democracy, governance, and human rights. We are the first. We are also the first to establish an institution, an institution called the Human Rights Institution based in Gambia. That's in recognition of our role as a government and state on the human right. We experienced a lot of coups in this continent, and that will remain a history. But what happened was in 1990, especially towards the end of the Cold War, if it has ended at all, taken a different form, we established what we call the Algiers Declaration on Unconstitutional Changes of Government. That was precisely to promote democracy, that any military coup, general, captain, whatever, who overthrew will never be recognized. His government will never be recognized by the OU. And that was not enough. We had in Lomé, how do we respond to unconstitutional change of government? So we have had a series of declarations from 1990, especially on the promotion of democracy, there's respect for the rule of law, and the strengthening of governance. So I think in a way we have made progress, and those who don't want to join this progress will, as President Obasanjo said, remain in the dustbin. So we're moving forward.
Tumaola, you have covered Africa, and the Prof is quite right. But my question is largely, probably you can give us your view of the democracy. I spoke of the first question, and also it's very nice to have all of these things on paper, but How do we implement? How are we implementing these things?
Yeah, implementation seems to be one of the biggest stumbling blocks. You have a lot of very nicely worded, very nicely thought out institutional processes that aren't really rolled out onto the ground. For the average man on the street, what does it mean when you talk about civil rights? What does it mean when you talk about civil participation? Many people across the continent still feel largely marginalized and largely shut out of the processes which affect them directly. Many people feel that they don't have a voice and that they are not recognized by the leadership or their governance. I mean, you just have to look out, for instance, in the Eastern DRC, where the ongoing cycle of conflict, which is largely
in the Goma region.
In the Goma region, yes. Goma up to the Lake Kivu, that area, there's a constant cycle of violence, and one wonders exactly what exacerbates why they can't find a solution to it. And part of the biggest problem is that you've got a large young population. Africa's got the youngest population in the world, fastest growing, but they are not part of the mainstream economies and development. Many of them feel shut out. So when you talk about governance issues, it's also about inclusiveness, especially
yes, I think
ground.
you're right. One of the things for me in Goma is actually, although I don't want us to dwell on Goma is actually a microcosm of the problems we are facing in Africa, because I am told many of the people who are stirring in Goma come from Rwanda and Burundi, largely, the Banyamurenge, I'm told.
Well, DRC is a very interesting example of failure in the governance of natural resources. It's a very good example. DRC is very rich. I am told that Ituri is perhaps as rich as France, which is one region. Goma is just as rich. But we have failed in the second area that we want to do, the area of governance. We have had Mobutu for years. New regimes have come in, but they are concentrating on power and the maintenance of power rather than distribution, equitable distribution of the resources of the country. And so what they need, and we're planning actually to have a major conference of that, is the governance of African natural resources. That's where the key problem is. It's not about mineral curse. No, it's Africa that has failed to address the issue of resources.
We'll get to the issue of resources. I want to stick to this area of democracy. And in my view, we have witnessed a wave of elections, especially this year and last year, a wave of elections across the continent. But it would, however, seem that African leaders seem to believe that having elections every 5 years means democracy.
Well, I think that's become the norm, or rather the standard of what a democratic country is. But democracy is defined by so many different things, and I think civil participation and a strong civil society, civil activism is also one of the key drivers of democracy. And you see, in for example, the Arab Spring, whereby you had the long-standing leaders, Hosni Mubarak being ousted, and then there was a void created. Gaddafi falling.
Gaddafi in Tunisia.
There you go. And then what happened? Because there was no culture of civil society, where then the population could take over and say, this is what we envisage. After the toppling of the strongman, then there seems to be a bit of a confusion and chaos, and then someone else is going to fill that void when that happens. So I think civil society also has a key role to play, and you find in many states, unfortunately, there's a big lack, whether it's by design or by nature or by nurture, whereby civil society is absolutely non-existent, unfortunately.
Well, I'm glad to raise the issue. If there's no leadership, if there's no planning, forward planning, there is no leader who is being planned to take over. Unlike in the case, let me make an example of South Africa, where we know when there's a president, the deputy president might become the next president. Yes. You don't see that in many other African countries.
No, you certainly don't. You see a situation whereby the guy in charge, or the main man, seems to have want to rule until the grave, and that is unfortunately an indictment on Africa and where the democratic process is. Whether it speaks to an issue of someone initially hanging on for the issue of legacy, and then it becomes an issue of many people fearing persecution because to stay in power after taking power, usually by force, is another question that needs to be dealt with.
Well, we'll continue in this vein. If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, you can call us on 011-714-5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Rights Recourse, or email your thoughts about this program and many others to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. Stay with us.
And I'm Prabhakshini Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser-Busch InBev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful. Have you ever considered skin bleaching?
Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin. Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse. As today we've changed tact. We're talking about Africa, looking at democratic institutions and democracy in Africa. Gentlemen, one of the things that I came across, I'm happy you mentioned the issue of legacy. Apparently, South Africa has at least 15 presidents who have served longer than a decade in office. And out of the top 10 longest serving leaders globally, African countries take up 6 slots. In other words, there were people who were born, the only president they know in Zimbabwe is President Mugabe.
That's right.
Well, that's we know in Africa. We know in Cameroon.
Paul Biya.
We know of Sassou Nguesso.
Yes. Sassou Nguesso in the
30 years. 30
years.
And
Museveni.
Museveni,
Yes.
30 years. But I think
Dos Santos in
Angola. But you're right. The question is why, and my problem is that first, Africa has no succession plan.
So something we spoke about earlier.
Yes, and where there is succession plan, is caught in a way. It protects if you serve 30 years, and you don't just leave. You live with someone who will actually protect you. So there is this syndrome of protectionism, that I am not going to leave until I find a successor. And the successor will be my successor, and I will be able to run the whole situation from my home.
And that's actually the point that was advanced by President Paul Kagame.
Yes.
President Paul Kagame says there is nobody else who can move Rwanda from where it is to the next level.
Yes.
And he sees himself as relatively young at 58.
That's very true, and I think Paul Kagame, in his own way, has been criticized from being, the poster child of governance, good governance, and Africa turning, the curve away from this sort of strongman dictator mentality to a progressive leader that's really taken a small country and made it a shining example of what can be done through good leadership. But again, those now who propped him up are starting to criticize him and say, okay, you've done enough, it's time to move on. And now he's saying, no, I can't, because, from Rwanda's painful past, he's the guy who led from the front. And with what's been happening with the ICC and everything else, he's got a lot of detractors as well. And in fact, South Africa has fallen out with Rwanda even on several occasions very publicly because of what has been happening politically and criticisms leveled at him. And now he's looking around and saying, but what happens post my presidential terms? Because then the issue of presidential impunity, does it apply? And this is the biggest fear.
The other problem for him is actually his irreparable fight with with France.
Yes.
When France said, we're pointing a finger at Kagame for the death of the former president, and Kagame said, no way.
Yes. He said there's no proof. He said that I was not involved with that. And then, you know, he and many African leaders would have echoed his sentiments when he said that, you know, this is again France meddling in African affairs and trying to sort of play puppet master in terms of what needs to happen in Africa's democratic processes, because it is a sovereign democratic state.
Let me find from you, Professor. Did the transformation of the OAU into the African Union bring the new commitment to democratic rule and human rights by leaders in Africa?
I think it has, but let me make one point clear, that I believe in constitutionalism, that if the Constitution says 2 terms, then it has to be 2 terms. If it says 5 terms, then it has to be 5 terms. But I think we should not defy the constitutions, and most constitutions in Africa are 2 terms. We have a problem in Burundi right now of a 3rd term.
Well, we have that problem in Uganda.
In Uganda of I don't know what term now. Yeah, but the point is, it really depends on the constitution. And we should be able to reinforce the values of the constitution. If we say 2 terms, it has to be 2 terms, and you have to leave. Even if you have to arrange for someone some form of succession that is suitable to you, you have to do that, but it has to be 2 terms. And that's really what is failing our democracy. That we have, first of all, we have leaders who don't want to go for several reasons, including personal enrichment. They just don't want to go. But fear of being prosecuted. Now you have this thing of ICC, and so if I leave, maybe ICC will come up, catch up with me. And so there are many fears, but unknown fears that really they don't want to leave. If you ask me why Paul Biya doesn't want to leave, I really do not understand. But 40 years, you're right when you say that there are people who were born, they don't know any other president except President Biya.
In fact, for you to grow up in an area where, in a country where you, for up to 30 years, you do not know any other president, the only president you know is an incumbent, that can create instability.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because how do you then participate in a free and diverse democratic process if you don't know
the problem has been also with, if you looked at Zimbabwe, for instance, when in one of the elections, I think in 2008, the army chief said if the opposition could become the government, they will not bow to the opposition. That means they have been under this one leader for so many years, they don't see themselves bowing to another leader.
Yeah. So then how do you then run a democratic state? Because without one of the key elements of that state, which is the military, openly coming out and being involved in a political, you know, conversation, when the military as an organ of state is just meant to be, you know, concerned with state affairs and not being bipartisan in any way whatsoever. So then that creates an environment where people feel that they are not free to express themselves. Therefore, it's either the status quo or what will happen to me. And we've seen in many African countries that leaders aren't shy to use organs of state to suppress revolt, to suppress any dissenting voices, and that also becomes a key issue, because when people have an issue, where do they go? There are no forums. I mean, with South Africa, we're very fortunate. You know, we've got you know, human rights organizations, we've got the public protector, etc. But in other African states, you've got the military, you've got the police and security services, and that's about it.
And they can't draw the line from what we call, in legal terms, separation of powers.
No, because we're dealing with a very complicated issue on the continent, and that's the issue of governance. Who governs a country and for what, on what grounds? If you are elected democratically, you have powers, certain powers, not all power, you are limited powers.
Prof, when we come back, we'll start with this issue of governance in Africa. As we said, we're discussing Africa today, and let us break a break. When we return, if you'd like to join us on today's discussion, you can always join us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Recourse, or email your thoughts, or give us other topics we can discuss around Africa, about Africa, when we have this discussion once a month about Africa, to Rights and Recourse at sabc.co.za. Stay with us.
SABC News, we report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse. As we discuss Africa today, we're discussing governance and democracy in Africa. Let's take this call, first of all, from somebody from Johannesburg, Chris Moore. Chris, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon, Tumile. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you, please?
I'm okay. Thank you for the interesting subject that you're talking about today. I find it quite disturbing that Africa, up until today, we still are struggling with this whole issue of, poor governance with the proclivity of our leaders to cling to power. I think the problem is, as one of your guests has mentioned, that it's also the lack of a civil society. But you find that in certain countries, the civil society, there is a crackdown on civil society. And I think the problem here in Africa specifically, I think it's our regional system. So, for instance, if you speak about Zimbabwe, previously, SADC really did fail Zimbabwe per se, because instead of enforcing all the provisions of the global political agreement, they seemed to be one-sided towards a certain party. So the problem here is the lack of strong regional enforcement mechanism. So, for instance, now in Burundi, there is a crisis, but instead of sending maybe a troop to go and quell that crisis, what's been done is try to address this situation, through diplomacy. So diplomacy is not really going to solve our problems. I think what we need is strong regional mechanisms to deal with, governments that are not really abiding by the doctrine of constitutionalism. So we can't have leaders manipulating constitutional provisions for their own personal enrichment or personal gain. So that's my contribution. I think we need strong regional mechanisms. So your African Union should be true to its word and not really, pay lip service to poor democratic tendencies. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Peace Moore. My apologies for mispronouncing your name there. I think Peace Moore spoke about two things. One was to try and resolve issues diplomatically. In other words, many of the issues that are supposed to be resolved are put under the carpet because now we're going to drink tea or we're going to discuss in rooms filled with smoke and come up smoking the pipe. And as a result, the civil society, who had gripes about how the governance is taking place, is left out.
Absolutely. I think it's also the question of the sovereignty of a state. This is a sticking point, whereas, whenever African leaders go to Addis Ababa for the African Union Summit, it's always about, speaking in one voice, Africa must move together. But when you have a situation like in Burundi, whereby, there's a question of, should we deploy an Africa standby force to try and, keep both sides apart, then the issue of, well, we're a sovereign state, under what terms do you deploy a standby force? Is it an invasion? So there's very many different diplomatic, sensitivities that still need to be ironed out. And unless there can be a unilateral approach where one size fits all and everyone agrees on it and not shift the goalpost when it suits them, then I don't think this will continue to be a sticking point.
Prof. Tumorola mentioned something there. That is, when people go to Addis Ababa, they come there and they say, we should discuss things like brothers and sisters. I think it's the same as the OAU. Nothing's changed.
Well, nothing has changed. Something has changed.
Or the more things change, the more they remain the same.
The more they remain the same. I think one thing that we have been able to address is the issue that was in the OAU Charter of non-interference in the domestic affairs. We have a new concept of non-indifference. And non-indifference means that we will not wait and look around and say you are sovereign and therefore you have a right to kill people. So that's the concept of non-indifference. Second, we have, if, for example, I'm making a quick, in the case of Burundi, if you follow the rules of the OAU and the AU now, and if you take, for example, the unconstitutional changes of government, it says very clearly, even in the Charter of Democracy, and if you delay election, you have committed unconstitutional change of government, and they will take action, and the responses are there. Sorry.
Timole, quickly, Prof, my apology, quickly. I just want us to go through all the issues. Pismo made reference to SADC having failed Zimbabwe, but we saw SADC acting differently in the case of Lesotho, setting up a commission to look into the strife between the army and the police in Lesotho. Should SADC do the same thing all over the country, or to all the countries in Africa?
Yes, I think it's very good point that Pismo was making, because you know, some countries can't be more equal than others where SADC is involved, and SADC has been working very hard over the last few years to try and be the regional organ of example when it comes to African issues. But you know, it's a very difficult sticking point, because also you look at the size of a country, and also the country's military strength, if we have to be frank, because SADC can get together and you know, wave the finger at Lesotho. It's a tiny landlocked country. You know, you got Big Brother South Africa will say, you know, this either happens or, and South Africa has got did send through, you know, some military and police presence to try and keep both sides apart. With Zimbabwe, it's a different story, because SADC can get together and the leaders can say either you do or. Then what do you do? Where do you mobilize the force for, and who will go in there? So
the question really, I want to go back to something we spoke about, this multi-term thing. Yes. Even though the AU had set a term limit for presidents, 2 terms, it was the former AU chairman, President Robert Mugabe, who said no, he doesn't go for that. He doesn't support that. And in my view, the string of multi-terms in government preferred by certain leaders, like President Pierre Nkurunziza in Burundi, the pending referendum in Rwanda regarding a 3rd term for President Paul Kagame, and the 30-year rule of President Yoweri Museveni, and the other 30-year or even more by President Robert Mugabe and President Dos Santos in Angola. Goodness, what is the AU doing about this?
Well, it all boils down to respect for the Constitution. And if you violate the Constitution, you have actually violated relations within the organization and so on. The problem is, do you have capacity to change? Do you have not even the capacity only, do you have the will to change? Because if the will is there, the capacity will be there. And so we left to say, okay, we will see, maybe we'll go next year, maybe next year, but we have, and you raised it before, our biggest problem on this continent is implementation deficit.
And this issue of, as the Prof refers to, you disregard the Constitution, and surely you cannot do that if you do not have democratic institutions, like you mentioned the public protector, you mentioned a strong judiciary, and you can't do that if you don't have those kind of things.
No, you really can't, because they hold you to account. They then become the voice of the people whose rights actually you are infringing upon by disregarding the Constitution that's set up to make sure everyone's rights are protected. And if there's no accountability, and there's you know, justice must be seen to be done as much as it is done. So,
well, let's take this. I don't know whether they can take this call from Musa from Cape Town. Musa, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon to you, sir.
Yes, what's your point?
According to the program related to Afrikaners, so I would suggest on my side that I'm coming from Uganda. I'm living here in South Africa. But according to the situation which was in Uganda, I was there before. President Museveni, since he ruled since he came to power, he voted in 1996, we were voted. But since from 1996, President Museveni never won election in Uganda. Up to now. There is no way we can say that we've been helped by the president who was born in that country. It looks like the president is not, it was not born in that country, because he cannot do nothing for people, he cannot help the community. A lot of things, small things which they can identify so that they can provide for people who are electing those people. We are electing them so that they can rule us nice, but the problem is when it comes to the Constitution, they are breaking the Constitution. They want to do their own things the way they want it to be, not the way we voters we want.
Thank you very much, Musa. That is Musa, originally from Uganda. I think what he's saying, you will remember very well, President Museveni, when he came to power, actually did away with political parties and say, we're going to have a system of government with no political parties. How can you have a system of government with no political parties unless you are a monarchy?
Well, in the 60s and 70s, even my own country was one-party system.
In Tanzania?
Yes, but one-party democracy.
With President Nyerere?
Yes, but one-party democracy, we would say. But eventually, as we went on, things have changed. We can go back to the 60s and 70s. We have established new norms, new regulations. I think what we fail on this continent is leadership. We don't have the leadership that has the responsibility to say, well, I was elected for 2 terms, I am leaving. Let someone else come in. Second, we don't have strong judiciary, so that I can go to court to say, no, I'm challenging the president because he has violated the Constitution. We don't have protectors, public protectors. And so we're caught up in a situation that if you do that, then I'll send the police, I'll send the army, and I will create cases against you.
We'll use strong arm tactics.
Strong arm tactics and so on. But I think I'm confident that this issue of constitution will hold. It's just a matter of time. When I look back in the coups, nobody would believe that there will be no coups in Africa, that no one will talk about coups. When I look at elections, yes, they are not perfect, but every year, we have a number of elections. They may not be perfect, but there are elections. We have institutions, independent electoral commission. Yeah, we have created those. We have civil societies. In the 60s, what civil society can talk to the government? The problem with civil society is that it's not well endowed. They don't have resources to do what they are supposed to do. And so they are financed from outside. And sometimes the agenda is not necessarily the agenda of change and development.
Well, we'll come back to those issues. I want us to close this issue of governance when we come back. I want us to close this issue of governance. The other thing I wanted to ask is, does the AU and the leadership in Africa still share the vision of its founders, President Olusegun Obasanjo and President Thabo Mbeki, or have we reverted back to the brotherhood of the old OAU? We'll answer those questions when we come back. I don't know whether we can take another call. So I can take another call. Good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Hello, it's not there. No, it's not there yet. If you'd like. Oh, it's there.
Yes,
okay. Yes, go ahead.
You are speaking to J.C. Maboshi from DRC. I'm calling from Pretoria.
Oh, yes.
One of the contribution is that I don't see a true... Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. We can hear you.
I don't see, when I try to analyze what is happening in Africa, I don't see a true leadership in Africa. What I believe is that Africa's presidents and other leaders are just, clubs of businessmen who are using their government to run well their business. No one cares about the population. I'll give you an example of what is happening in DRC and Burundi and other countries. These people are giving support to each other just because they want to protect their own interests. We have seen it, like in DRC, the country I'm coming from. In 2006, the president cheated, but he received support from different countries of Africa. In 2011, he cheated. He received support from countries of Africa. So these people who are governing us, they are just businessmen, but they are using the government so that they can run their business. So they cannot condemn people who are, killing, the populations like in Burundi, like in Congo and other countries, one, because they are there to protect their own interests. And as long as one president in Africa is giving them guarantee for their business, they are behind them. So when they come together in SADC and other African organizations, they are there for their business. They are not there for the population of Africa. So I think African people, we must stand up and start giving, a big sign to show them that we are tired with what they are doing in Africa.
Thank you very much, Mabushi. Mabushi is phoning there from Pretoria, is originally from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, you can still call us from 0117 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Rise Recourse. We'll respond to Mabushi's comment after the break.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse. To continue our program here today, talking about all things about Africa, democracy and democratic institutions in Africa. Prof, Mabusha was raising something there. He says the leadership in Africa are businessmen who are using state resources to run their countries for themselves. In other words, what we call in South Africa, state capturing. He's captured the state.
Well, it's a phenomenon that is gaining currency on the continent. Some people call it a predator state. A predator state is a state that looks at itself and its cronies for development and forget completely about the people. And the problem, it goes back to the problem we raised earlier, leadership, accountability, honesty. We don't have this. We have leaders who, why would you give someone a tender that you're not allowed to do that? And you have 70% of the tender. I don't want to mention countries. Why would you do that? You're not allowed to do that. Why would you allow your cronies to take certain position because you know? And that is precisely why they refuse to go after 2 terms. Because somebody is going to raise the issue and take them to court and say, what is this? How did you accumulate all this? But if you stay for longer, maybe people will forget. But you see, our people are very simple people. If we provide them with the basics, water, sanitation, food, education, all this, they will not raise so much. But if you take all of these resources that you're supposed to help these people for common services, and you use them for yourself, they will revolt. But I think our people are very peaceful.
I wish you also raised something else that has to do with the elections. I don't know which year it is. I think it's 2006. I'm not too sure. The elections there were rigged, as I said, and then when the people revolted, countries in Africa came and prop up the government of the incumbent president, and those countries were Zimbabwe and Angola.
Yeah, this is true, and I think this also speaks to the kind of challenge that is faced by regional blocs and other countries when they look at a situation where when people revolt and you have a violent, for lack of a better word, overthrow, or people reject a government, usually, and as Prof said, you know, in an African context, people will come out and they'll make their voices heard. But once that first step is taken, it doesn't mean that the battle is over. People then retreat, and you create a void. We've seen with what has happened with the Arab Spring. We've
seen what has happened in Burkina Faso.
Faso. And so once the regime falls, then people retreat because, you know, the change has come. But you know, then there's a void, and where there's a void, someone else is going to fill it, and then we see the same perpetuation falling. So this is where civil society, again, it comes back to the issue. A strong civil society to say, where do we go beyond toppling of the strong man or the regime that is failing us?
This is something else I wanted to raise in my research. I looked at the Mo Ibrahim Prize to help the growth of governance. In Africa. He doesn't seem to be getting support from the AU, Mo Ibrahim. And he has not been able to award this prize to anybody. The last person to get the award was the president of Cape Verde.
Cape Verde, yeah. Well, there are criteria for, being awarded this. But let me just say that you have 84 indicators. I don't know who in Europe will go through these 84 indicators.
Very true.
But we have 5 Africans who have gone through these 84 indicators, and they were awarded. And I think we will have more in future. What we are facing is if we can deal with this state, what you call
state capture.
State capture, you see, because as a means of business, then we will get government. But I think the issue we are addressing today, the governance issue, is really critical. Accountability. I mean, you have to be accountable to the people. Some degree of honesty, understanding of what is happening in the country, and help. I think we have 2 problems in Africa. The first is implementation deficit, and the second is leadership deficit. And that really has created a lot of problems. We have to address this.
But I also believe that some of these problems, like leadership deficit, are created and they are nurtured because it suits the agenda of those who are currently the incumbents. If you have a situation where there's no one else to challenge you, it suits the agenda of those who want to rule perpetually.
Jeremy, one thing I forgot. Today, the 6th of March, is actually the 59th anniversary of the independence of Ghana. The question I'm asking there is, has Ghana something to show for the 59 years?
Well, I think so. I think both Kufuor, George Rawling, and Mahama have done quite a bit. You know that we can discuss all these things, but we have on this continent 10 fastest growing economies. I suppose Ghana is one of them.
The fastest growing one today, I'm told, is Ethiopia.
And Ethiopia is also. So it's not gloom and doom. We have prospects for doing, if we get right leadership. And I think Ghana has the right leadership. It may not be 100%, but they have a right leadership.
Well, when we come back, if you'd like to join us, you can still call us. And when we come back, we'll tackle the issue of border disputes. There are huge border disputes in Africa, in many parts of Africa, and we'll look at that for today also. And those could be the breeding ground for insecurity. If you'd like to call us, you can join us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Recourse. Stay with us.
Good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines. Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon only on the SABC News channel.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse as we continue our discussion about Africa, democracy and governance. We have a caller, JC. Good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking me back again. I think the problem you are discussing is very sensitive and very important for us. You know, like Congolese who are living now outside like foreigners. I'll give you an example of what is happening in DRC. Just see in the eastern part of DRC, all the foreigners, forces, military forces in the eastern part of Congo. What are they doing there? They are there just to secure the businesses of their government in the eastern part of Congo. Because they are watching how people are being killed, women are being raped, and it's for years. So they are there not for, for the population. They are there because they were mandated by their government to go and secure their businesses. So we cannot tell, that we Congolese, we know. In 2006, there were some ballots that were already filled during the election of 2006 in DRC. And those, filled ballots were, arrested in DRC. They were coming from South Africa. And the question is, who filled those ballots? So we just understand that we cannot even trust our fellow South Africans because the same powers, we say that no people are suffering and so many things, but practically we are supporting those who are letting those people suffer.
Thank you very much, JC. JC, thank you very much. JC, we are able to deduce...
are supporting the sectors in Africa because of their interest.
Okay, JC, we are able to deduce what you are saying. JC is talking largely about foreigners, which we did make reference to in the eastern DRC, in the Goma area. And he is talking about, that country is so huge. In the old days, I used to think Katanga is a country on its own. Yeah. The province of Katanga could be a country on its own. Yeah. And he talks also about mercenaries from South Africa who go there and go and help prop up all of these other forces, foreign forces that are there.
Well, the question that's always been asked is who gives military support to the myriad of armed groups? I mean, just going out into the east, you've got rebel groups by the dozen, and they are well armed, and they've got, you can see they've got some kind of basic military training. They get it from somewhere, so that's the question. While they are busy arming these people, what's happening behind the scenes? And I mean, a lot of Congolese people are very frustrated, especially out in the east, by what they were perceived or what looked like a lack of decisiveness by the MONUSCO force there, because sometimes the UN troops didn't want to get involved too much in skirmishes. They were there under a particular mandate and they stuck to it, which created a misconception that they were there actually to try and prop up what was happening, which is not necessarily the case. The FIB has come in now, the Forward Intervention Brigade, under a new mandate, and since it's come in, we haven't seen as many uprisings.
Let's take this call. There's Eugene on the line from Wheatbank region. Good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Hi, afternoon. Thank you very much. Hi to your panel. The topic you're discussing today is very much important in terms of
Thank you.
I've been following up Zimbabwe and South Africa. So the two presidents, the former president of South Africa, Mandela, and Robert Mugabe, they all wanted to achieve. But the difference is the target. I didn't follow the Western African countries, but I believe that they are the leaders who wanted to do so much for their people so that they can liberate the people completely. But the difference is they wanted to do all by themselves. With Mugabe, he wanted to achieve so much, like the land issue, like the colonization of the mines and all that. He wanted to do it by himself, and you can't do it in 20 years. You have to do it maybe in 60 years. So with Mandela, he set up himself a target which I want to achieve this, and after achieving this, I go and the other people they will do. So Mandela realized that solving the problem of the land, it will take him 20 years, 50 years. Solving the problem of the mining industries and all the racist issues and all that, it will take him about another 50 years. So he realized that he can't do that alone. He needs the help of a fellow comrade and all that. I believe that if the other African leaders, they can have a confidence in their fellow young leaders which are upcoming and teaching them and showing them the way and leave it for them, it will help a lot.
Thank you, Eugene. Thank you very much, Eugene. Thank you. Thank you, Eugene. Makes a point saying there are leaders like President Mandela who stayed for one term only and then said, I need a younger man to take over. I want to go and rest. And don't call me, I'll call you. Let us take another call. Good afternoon. Welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Hello.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mateza. Can you hear me?
Yes, Titus, we can hear you very well. I hope you can hear us.
You know what? In Africa, Mr. Mateza, we've got only one problem. I don't know if you're going to hear me. Can I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, we've got one problem in Africa. The problem is this. Our black presidents, they took over the power from the white people. They don't want to go away. As we mentioned earlier on, for example, of Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe, for example, of Angola, you mentioned another guy, I think in North Africa. Those guys, they don't want to go out of the power. Mateza, once we got people who's going to stay for 10 years, or at least as you mentioned earlier on, for example, of Mandela, who raised hand before he finished 1 year, then Africa is going to be all right. Because what is happening now in Africa is one problem. People who go in power, they stay there forever. That is what I want to raise. You mentioned earlier on about Burundi. It's what's happening in Mozambique. It's Frelimo in Maputo, Mozambique. They don't want to go out. I think Zambia is coming slightly better compared to Zimbabwe. Zambia is much better. There was Kaunda who supported Julius Nyerere, also supported a lot of countries in Africa. They are coming much better compared to the rest of the country in Africa. The black president in Africa, they don't want to leave the power. That's the problem that we are facing the whole continent of Africa.
Thank you very much, Titus. Thank you very much for your words. Thank you for your input. Titus there mentioning Mozambique. We know there's strife in Mozambique presently, which we thought will never be there, that it's been done. I'm told Renamo is saying they're going back to the bush. There's some strife in the north of Mozambique. It's a real disappointment.
Well, I think Frelimo is strong enough to address some of these issues. I don't know of any political party that requests to have its own army, to have its own protection services, and Renamo has done that. I don't know the agenda of Renamo, so we should not really. Mozambique is going through a process. That's right. There is an opposition of Renamo, but I think it can be settled rather than going to war. And I can assure you, I don't think Renamo will win a war.
Let's get a final word from you.
And on the issue of the Renamo question, I think it also speaks again to the maturity of the democratic process, whereby Mozambique has moved on and is trying to move on with the wealth of mineral resources discovered off the coast. This issue of the ace up the sleeve when it comes to the military might must be done away with. And it must
well, gentlemen, it's very clear we want to solve all the issues around the problems of Africa on this program. And in the words of the first president of Ghana, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, countrymen, the task ahead is great indeed, and heavy is the responsibility, and yet it is a noble and glorious challenge, a challenge which calls for the courage to dream, the courage to believe, the courage to dare, the courage to do, the courage to envision, the courage to fight, the courage to work, the courage to achieve the highest excellencies and the fullest greatness of man. Dare we ask for more in life. This has been Rights and Recourse. This program is repeated at 5 on Monday morning. Thank you to our guests and goodbye.
And